I died that night. At least that's what the doctors told my wife when they couldn't find my pulse. But I wasn't in a hospital bed. I was somewhere else. Somewhere impossible. And the beings that held me there, they knew things about Jesus Christ that the Vatican has never spoken about. Things that made me question everything I believed. Before I tell you what they revealed, hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear will shake the foundation of everything you thought you knew about faith, the universe, and why we're really here. I remember the exact moment my life split into before and after. March 17th, 2023, 11:47 p.m. I know because I just checked my phone before placing it on the nightstand. The blue light casting shadows across our bedroom ceiling. My wife Sarah was already asleep beside me, her breathing soft and rhythmic. I remember thinking how peaceful she looked, how safe our little world felt in that moment. I closed my eyes. When I opened them again, I wasn't in my bed. The first thing I noticed was the light, not harsh, not blinding, but everywhere. It seemed to come from the walls themselves, a soft luminescence that reminded me of moonlight filtered through water. I tried to sit up, but my body wouldn't respond. Panic clawed at my chest. I could move my eyes, barely turn my head, but everything else felt locked in place by an invisible force. That's when I saw them. 3 figures stood at the foot of what I can only describe as a platform. Not a bed, not a table. Something that defied description, as if it existed between states of matter. The beings were tall, impossibly thin, with skin that seemed to shimmer between gray and a pale blue. Their eyes, God, their eyes, were large and dark, but not empty. There was intelligence there. Ancient intelligence. "Please," I tried to say, but no sound came out. My throat worked, my lips moved, but silence. The tallest one moved closer. It didn't walk. It glided, as if gravity was merely a suggestion. When it stood directly above me, I felt something impossible, a presence in my mind. Not invading, not forcing, but waiting. Like someone politely knocking on a door. "Do not be afraid," came a voice that wasn't a voice. It resonated inside my skull, calm and measured. "We have brought you here because you have been chosen." Chosen? Chosen for what? My mind raced with every alien abduction story I'd ever dismissed as nonsense, every conspiracy theory I'd laughed at over beers with friends. This couldn't be real. This was a dream, a hallucination. Maybe I was having a stroke. "You are not dreaming, Marcus. You are more awake now than you have ever been." It knew my name. The being's hand, if you could call it that. 3 long fingers and a thumb reached toward my chest. I wanted to scream, to thrash, to run, but my body remained frozen. The moment its fingertips touched my sternum, everything changed. Images flooded my consciousness, not pictures, but experiences, memories that weren't mine. I saw Earth from above, spinning in the darkness, so beautiful it made my heart ache. I saw civilizations rise and fall in the blink of an eye. I saw wars, plagues, moments of incredible compassion and unspeakable cruelty. Humanity's entire timeline compressed into seconds. And then I saw him, a man in simple robes, walking dusty roads under a merciless sun. Dark hair, weathered hands, eyes that held depths I couldn't fathom. I knew immediately who it was, though I'd never been particularly religious. My parents had dragged me to church as a kid, but it never stuck. Yet here, somehow, I was seeing Jesus Christ. But he wasn't alone. Standing beside him, translucent and shimmering in the heat, was one of them. One of these beings, watching, guiding. The images stopped as suddenly as they'd started. The being withdrew its hand, and I gasped, suddenly able to breathe deeply again. "What you have been taught," the voice said, "is both truth and lie. We have come to show you what was hidden, what was changed, what was forgotten." My mind reeled. "Why me?" I managed to croak out, my voice finally working. "Why are you showing me this?" The three beings exchanged what I can only describe as a glance, though no features on their faces moved. "Because you asked," the tall one said simply. I had no idea what that meant. I'd never asked for this, never wanted this. I was a high school history teacher from Columbus, Ohio. I coached junior varsity basketball. I grilled burgers on Sundays. I was nobody. "You asked when you wept in the darkness," the being continued, and my blood ran cold. 3 months ago, when you questioned if anything meant anything at all. They were talking about the night after my father's funeral, the night I'd broken down alone in my car, demanding answers from a God I wasn't sure existed. The night I'd screamed into the void, "If you're real, show me something that matters." Oh God. They'd heard me. The being moved toward a wall that suddenly became transparent, revealing an impossible vista of stars and galaxies spinning in an endless cosmic dance. "Come," it said. "It is time you learned the truth about the one you call Jesus Christ." Suddenly, I could move. The invisible force that had held me down simply released. I sat up slowly, my muscles trembling, half expecting this to be some kind of trick. But the beings didn't react. They just waited, patient as stone. "I don't understand," I said, my voice cracking. "What do you mean what I've been taught is a lie?" The tall being gestured toward the transparent wall, and the view shifted. Now I was looking at Earth again, but different. Younger, greener, the continents in unfamiliar shapes. "We have been here since the beginning," the voice in my mind explained. "We are the watchers. We do not interfere, but we observe. We document. We remember what your species forgets. You're saying you've been watching humanity since when? Since you first looked up at the stars and wondered if you were alone." A chill ran through me. The second being, shorter and more slender, moved closer. When it spoke, the voice was different, softer, almost feminine. "Your people have always known we were here. Your ancient texts speak of us. The sons of God who came down, the angels, the watchers, the sky people. Every culture has their name for us." I thought of my history classes, the ancient astronaut theories my students would bring up, half joking. I'd always dismissed them as pseudoscience, entertainment for cable TV. But here I was, living proof that maybe, just maybe, those crackpots weren't entirely wrong. "And Jesus?" I asked, my throat tight. "You're saying he was, what? One of you?" "No," the tall being said firmly. "He was entirely human. That was the point." The view changed again. Now I was seeing a small village, maybe 1st century Middle East. Mud brick houses, dusty streets, people in simple robes going about their daily lives. The image zoomed in on a young woman, barely more than a girl, drawing water from a well. Mary, I whispered. Yes, Miriam of Nazareth. She was chosen, but not in the way your religions teach. I watched as the scene shifted to night. Mary was alone in a small room, lit by a single oil lamp. She was praying, her hands clasped, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't hear her words, but I felt her desperation, her fear, her hope. Then the room filled with light. Not the soft glow of this ship, but something more intense, more focused. A being appeared, not like the one standing with me now, but similar. Taller, more radiant, almost painful to look at even in this vision. We call them the Elohim, the feminine voice explained. They are our, you would say, our elders. They work on a level we do not fully understand ourselves. I watched, transfixed, as the being approached Mary. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She simply stood there, trembling but brave, and listened. What is it saying to her? I asked. The truth. That she has been chosen to carry a child who would bridge two worlds, a human child, but one conceived with knowledge from beyond your world, enhanced, designed, perfect. Wait, I interrupted, my mind spinning. Are you saying Jesus was some kind of genetic experiment? The three beings were silent for a moment. Then the tall one spoke again. We are saying that the divine and the scientific are not opposites, Marcus. They are the same thing, viewed from different angles. Your people separated them because you could not understand both at once. But they were always united. The image shifted forward in time. I saw Mary, now visibly pregnant, traveling with an older man, Joseph. I saw the birth in Bethlehem, but this time there was more. Above the stable, invisible to the people below, I saw 3 ships hovering, silent and watchful. The star, I breathed. The star of Bethlehem was one of your ships. It was a beacon, a signal to those who were meant to find him. The wise men, as you call them, were scholars who understood the signs. They knew what was coming. I felt sick and exhilarated at the same time. Everything I'd been taught in Sunday school, every Christmas pageant, every sermon. It was all real, but not in the way I'd imagined. Why? I asked desperately. Why would you do this? Why create Jesus? The being turned to face me fully, and for the first time, I thought I detected something like emotion in those dark, fathomless eyes. Because humanity was destroying itself, and we needed to give you something to believe in. The weight of those words hit me like a physical blow. I stood there, legs unsteady, staring at these impossible beings who had just rewritten everything I thought I knew about the foundation of Western civilization. You're telling me, I said slowly, trying to wrap my mind around it, that you created Jesus to save humanity from itself? Not created, the feminine voice corrected gently. Guided, enhanced. Mary's child was always going to be born. We simply ensured he would be more. The view shifted again. Now I saw Jesus as a child, maybe 7 or 8 years old. He was in a workshop, watching Joseph plane a piece of wood. But in the corner of the room, shimmering and barely visible, was one of the watchers, observing, always observing. You watched him grow up, I said. It wasn't a question. We protected him, guided him. When he went into the wilderness for 40 days, he was not alone. When he spoke in the temple and confounded the elders, it was because we had opened his mind to understanding beyond his years. I thought of the biblical accounts, the miracles, the teachings that had echoed through 2,000 years of human history. And the miracles? The healing? Walking on water? The tall being moved closer, and I felt that presence in my mind again, but stronger this time. Some were real. Some were exaggerated over time. Some were misunderstood. But all had a purpose: to make people believe that change was possible, that love could conquer hate, that sacrifice meant something. But he died, I protested. He was crucified. If you were protecting him, why would you let that happen? The three beings exchanged that wordless communication again. When they responded, I felt a wave of something I can only describe as profound sadness, because that was always the plan. His death was not a failure, Marcus. It was the entire point. The scene changed to Golgotha. I'd seen paintings, movies, depictions of the crucifixion my whole life. But this was different. This was real. I watched Jesus struggle under the weight of the cross, saw the nails driven through his flesh, heard the sounds of his breathing become labored and desperate. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Tears streamed down my face. Why? I choked out. If he was so important, why let him suffer like that? Because humanity needed to see that even the best of you could endure the worst. That suffering was not the end. That sacrifice had power beyond death itself. I saw the moment he died, saw his head slump forward, saw the Roman soldier pierce his side to confirm it. But then I saw something else, something that made my breath catch in my throat. Above the cross, invisible to everyone below, a ship hovered, and from that ship a beam of light so pure, so concentrated, it made everything else look dim by comparison. What is that? I whispered. Watch, the tall being commanded. The light touched Jesus' body. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, at a cellular level, I could somehow see it happening at a cellular level. Everything began to change. Cells that had died sparked back to life. Wounds began to close. The body that had been broken started to repair itself. The resurrection, I breathed. You brought him back. We returned what belonged to him. His consciousness, his soul, whatever you wish to call it, was never gone. It had simply stepped away. We brought it back and gave him a body that could no longer die. But the tomb, I said, remembering the accounts. The stone was rolled away. The disciples found it empty. The feminine voice spoke again, and I detected what might have been amusement. He walked out, Marcus. 3 days later, when the body was ready, he simply walked out. The guards you've been told about? They were real, but they were not sleeping. Then what? Then they saw something that shattered their understanding of reality, and they ran. The tall being turned to me, and I felt its full attention like a weight. But what happened next is what your churches never taught, and it changes everything. My hands were shaking. I'd been standing for what felt like hours, though time seemed meaningless in this place. The beings waited patiently as I processed what they'd shown me, what they were claiming. What do you mean, what happened next? I finally managed. The Bible says he appeared to his disciples. He spent 40 days on earth before ascending to heaven. That part is true, the tall being confirmed. But what he did during those 40 days, what he learned, what he was shown, that was carefully edited from your texts. The view shifted again. I saw Jesus, alive, standing on a hillside at night. He looked different now. The wounds were gone, but there was something else. He seemed to almost glow from within, as if his body was barely containing some vast energy. And standing before him were a dozen of the Watchers. He met with you, I said. He met with the Elohim. We were merely there to witness. I watched as the tallest of the glowing beings approached Jesus. They stood face to face, and even though I couldn't hear words, I could feel the weight of the conversation. This was no casual meeting. This was a debriefing, a transfer of information, a passing of something profound. What are they telling him? I asked. The truth about his mission, about what comes next for humanity, about the choice your species would face. What choice? The feminine voice responded, and I heard sadness in it again. The choice between evolution and extinction, between growing beyond your violent nature or destroying yourselves completely. The scene changed. Now Jesus was with his disciples, but this time I saw more than what the Gospels described. He wasn't just telling them to spread his message of love and redemption. He was teaching them something else, something deeper. I saw him draw symbols in the dirt, complicated geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with meaning. I saw him point to the stars, explaining something that made the disciples' eyes go wide with wonder and fear. He was teaching them about you, I realized, about the universe, about everything. He was giving them context, showing them that the kingdom of heaven he spoke of was not some distant afterlife, but a state of consciousness, a level of existence that humanity could reach if they chose to evolve. But that's not what the church teaches, I protested. They teach heaven is a place you go when you die if you believe in Jesus. Yes, the tall being said simply. They teach that. But that is not what he taught. I felt anger rising in me, hot and sudden. So you're saying the church got it wrong? That 2,000 years of Christianity has been based on a misunderstanding. Not a misunderstanding, a deliberate change, a simplification for people who were not ready to know the full truth. The view showed me a council of men, centuries after Jesus' death, sitting in a grand room filled with scrolls and documents. I watched as they debated, argued, selected certain texts and rejected others. I saw gospels I'd never heard of being thrown into flames. The Council of Nicaea, I whispered. I'd taught about this in my history classes, but I'd never really understood what was lost. They kept what served their purpose, and the feminine voice explained. They removed what would make people ask too many questions. The teachings about the stars, about other worlds, about humanity's place in a vast and populated universe, all of it was carefully erased. But why? I demanded. Why would they hide that? Because power comes from controlling what people believe. And it is easier to control people who think they are alone in the universe, who think this life is all that matters, who think they need intermediaries to reach God. Jesus' face filled my vision again. He was standing on that hill, preparing to leave. The disciples were gathered around him, some crying, some trying to be brave. I saw him place his hands on each of their heads, blessing them, transferring something I couldn't quite see. Then he looked up, directly at where I was watching from, as if he could see through time itself. And he smiled. He knew, the tall being said. He knew that one day we would tell this story again, when humanity was ready to hear it. And you think we're ready now? The being's next words made my blood run cold. Number. But you are out of time. Those 4 words hung in the air like a death sentence. Out of time. I felt my stomach drop, felt a primal fear grip my spine. What do you mean, out of time? My voice came out barely above a whisper. The transparent wall changed again. Now I was looking at Earth from space, beautiful and blue, turning slowly in the void. But something was wrong. I could see it even from this distance. Brown patches spreading across the green, gray smog blanketing entire continents. Oceans reflecting light in sickly, unnatural ways. Your species has reached a critical juncture, the tall being explained. The same juncture that 1,000 other civilizations have reached before you. The moment where you must choose. Choose what? To grow up or die. The view zoomed in, showing me cities choked with pollution, forests burning, ice caps melting. I saw people fighting over water, over food, over land. I saw weapons capable of ending all life, controlled by leaders who seemed almost eager to use them. We know, I said, my voice thick with emotion. We know we're destroying the planet. We know we're on the brink. But what does that have to do with Jesus? With any of this? The feminine voice responded, and I felt her words resonate in my chest. Everything. Jesus was meant to teach you how to transcend your violent nature, how to love instead of hate, how to build instead of destroy. But his message was corrupted, weaponized, turned into another excuse for division and war. I thought of the Crusades, the Inquisition, the countless wars fought in Christ's name. I thought of churches condemning people for loving the wrong person, politicians using religion to justify cruelty, bombs blessed by priests before they were dropped on civilians. So we failed, I said flatly. We had a chance and we blew it. Not yet, the tall being said. That is why we have brought you here, why we are showing you this truth. You are not the first we have contacted, Marcus, and you will not be the last. I don't understand. What can I possibly do? I'm a nobody, a teacher from Ohio. Who's going to listen to me? Everyone who is ready to hear. The truth has a way of spreading, even when powerful forces try to suppress it. The third being, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. Its voice was deeper, more resonant, like rocks grinding together. We have watched humanity for millennia. We have seen you at your worst and your best, and we have seen that you are capable of incredible things when you work together. When you remember that you are all one species, on one small world, in an infinite universe. But if you've been watching all this time, I argued, if you're so powerful, why not just fix it? Why not stop the wars, clean up the planet, force us to evolve? Because that is not how evolution works, the feminine voice said gently. True growth only comes from choice, from struggle, from learning the hard way. We can show you the path, but we cannot walk it for you. What happens if we don't choose correctly? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know the answer. The view changed one final time. I saw Earth, but lifeless. The blue was gone, replaced by gray and brown. The clouds were toxic. The oceans were dead. Cities stood empty, crumbling monuments to a species that had destroyed itself. This, the tall being said simply. This is what happens when a species fails the test. When they choose power over wisdom, greed over compassion, fear over love. I felt tears streaming down my face. Is that our future? It is one possible future, but it is not inevitable. That is the message we need you to carry. That is why you were brought here. What message? I demanded, my voice breaking. That aliens helped Jesus? That the church has been lying? That we're all going to die unless we fundamentally change who we are? Who's going to believe that? The tall being moved closer, and I felt its hand on my shoulder. The touch was cold, but somehow comforting. Those who need to believe will believe, and that might be enough. Enough for what? To tip the scales, to reach critical mass, to give humanity one last chance to become what Jesus tried to show you that you could be. I stood there, trembling, overwhelmed by the weight of what I was being asked to carry. Then a thought struck me. Wait, I said. If Jesus was so important to your plan, where is he now? The three beings were silent for a long moment. Then the tall one spoke, and its words made my heart stop. Would you like to meet him? I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what I'd just heard. Meet him? I repeated stupidly. Meet Jesus? He's here? He has been with us for a very long time, the feminine voice said. After his resurrection, after the 40 days, he did not ascend to some distant heaven. He came here to learn, to understand, to prepare for his return. My legs gave out. I collapsed to my knees on the strange, shifting floor of the ship, my mind reeling. 2,000 years of prayers, of people begging Jesus to come back, to save them, to fix the world. And he'd been up here the whole time. Why? I choked out. Why would he leave? Why wouldn't he stay and help us? Because his work on earth was finished, the tall being explained. He planted the seed. It was up to humanity to nurture it, to make it grow. But he has been watching, waiting, hoping you would find your way. The room began to shift around me. The walls became more translucent, the light softer. I felt a presence approaching, something vast and warm, like standing near a star. Then he walked through the wall as if it wasn't there. I knew it was him immediately, though he looked nothing like the paintings in churches. He was taller than I expected, his skin darker, his features more Middle Eastern. His eyes were the color of deep amber, and they held an eternity of wisdom and sorrow. He wore simple clothes, not robes, but something that seemed to shift between states, like the ship itself. But what struck me most was his smile. It was warm, genuine, and impossibly sad. Marcus, he said, and his voice was everything I'd imagined, and nothing I'd expected. It resonated not just in my ears, but in my soul. I'm glad you came. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. I just knelt there, tears pouring down my face, staring at the man who had shaped human history more than any other. He knelt down in front of me, bringing himself to my level. Please don't worship me, he said gently. That was never what I wanted. I tried to tell them, I'm just a man. A man who was given a gift, yes, but still just a man. You're Jesus Christ, I managed to whisper. I'm Yeshua, he corrected with a slight smile. Jesus is what they called me later, in languages I never spoke. But yes, I am who you think I am." He reached out and placed his hand over my heart. Warmth flooded through me. Not physical heat, but something deeper. I felt every fear, every doubt, every moment of pain in my life being acknowledged and somehow held. "You're afraid," he said. It wasn't a question. "Of course I'm afraid," I said, finding my voice. "They've shown me things that change everything. They want me to tell the world. But who's going to believe me?" "Very few," he said honestly. "They didn't believe me either, and I could perform miracles." "You'll be called a liar, a heretic, possibly insane. Your life will become difficult in ways you can't imagine. Then why tell me all this? Why put this on me?" He sat back, his expression thoughtful. "Do you remember what you asked that night in your car? After your father died?" I nodded, my throat tight. I asked for something that mattered, for proof that any of this meant anything. "And now you have it," he said simply. "Now you know that love is real, that sacrifice has power, that humanity has a purpose beyond just surviving day to day. You know that you're not alone in the universe, and that even your smallest choices ripple out into eternity." "But the churches," I protested, "everything they teach about you, about heaven and hell, about salvation, they got it all wrong." His expression grew serious. "They got the heart of it right. Love one another, forgive each other, seek something greater than yourself. But yes, they wrapped it in fear and control and judgment. They made it about being saved from some eternal punishment instead of about growing into something better. So there's no hell, no punishment for sins." He was quiet for a moment. "The hell you create for yourselves, through hate and violence and cruelty, is real enough. The suffering you inflict on each other and on your world, that's hell. But some cosmic torture chamber where I send people who didn't believe exactly the right things." He shook his head. "That was never part of the plan." I laughed, a sound somewhere between relief and hysteria. "The Pope is going to hate this." Yeshua's eyes twinkled. "The Pope will survive. What matters is whether humanity will." His face grew serious again, and I felt the weight of 2,000 years in his gaze. "Marcus, I need you to understand something. I'm coming back." The words echoed in the chamber, and I felt the three watchers shift, their attention intensifying. This was it. This was the reason they'd brought me here. "The second coming," I breathed. "It's real." "It was always real," Yeshua said, standing and offering me his hand. I took it, and he pulled me to my feet with surprising strength, but not in the way the prophecies describe, not with trumpets and angels and judgment. That was humanity adding drama to a simple truth. "Then how?" I asked. "When?" He walked toward the transparent wall, gazing down at earth spinning below. "Soon. Within your lifetime. But not to punish or condemn, to help you through what comes next." The view shifted again, showing me scenes I recognized: protests, climate disasters, wars, but also moments of incredible kindness, of people helping strangers, of communities coming together in crisis. "Humanity is at a crossroads," Yeshua continued. "The next 50 years will determine whether your species survives or joins the countless others who destroyed themselves when they reached this level of technological development." "The Watchers told me about the choice," I said. "Evolve or die." "Yes, And the window for that choice is closing. Climate collapse, nuclear war, artificial intelligence that surpasses human control, biological weapons, resource depletion. You're facing multiple extinction-level threats simultaneously. And you're coming back to save us from all that? He turned to face me, and his expression was fierce. No. I'm coming back to remind you that you can save yourselves, that you have everything you need within you, the intelligence, the compassion, the creativity. You just need to remember how to use it. But we're so divided, I protested. We can't agree on anything. We can't even agree on basic facts anymore. How are we supposed to come together and fix problems this big? By remembering what I tried to teach you 2,000 years ago, he said. That you're all connected. That what you do to the least of your brothers and sisters, you do to yourself. That love isn't a weakness. It's the most powerful force in the universe. I thought about the world I'd left behind. The hatred on social media, the politicians who thrived on division, the corporations that profited from destruction, the religious leaders who preached judgment instead of compassion. It seems impossible, I said quietly. Most worthwhile things do, Yeshua replied. When I started preaching, I was one man with 12 followers, most of whom didn't really understand what I was trying to say. The Roman Empire controlled the known world. The religious authorities had power and wealth and every reason to silence me. And they did silence me. They killed me. But the message survived. It spread. It changed the world. It also caused a lot of harm, I pointed out. The Inquisition, the Crusades, colonialism justified by converting the heathens. His face clouded with pain. Yes. That's what happens when people twist a message of love into a weapon of control. That's why I'm coming back. To correct the record. To show people what I actually meant. Not what emperors and popes and televangelists claimed I meant. How will you do it? How will you make people listen this time? I won't come alone, he said. The Watchers will reveal themselves to the world. Undeniable proof that we're not alone in the universe. That will shatter a lot of comfortable beliefs, force people to reconsider everything they thought they knew. That will cause chaos, I said. Panic, maybe even war. Yes, he agreed. It will be the most disruptive event in human history. But disruption is sometimes necessary for growth. A caterpillar must dissolve completely before it can become a butterfly. The tall watcher moved closer, its voice resonating in my mind again. This is why we need people like you, Marcus. People who can help prepare humanity for what's coming. People who can tell the truth before the truth arrives and breaks their reality. But I'm not ready, I said desperately. I don't know how to prepare people for something like this. Yeshua placed both hands on my shoulders, and I felt that warmth again, that overwhelming sense of being known and accepted completely. You don't have to be ready, he said. You just have to be willing. The rest will come. When? I asked. When is this going to happen? The three watchers and Yeshua exchanged glances. When he spoke again, his voice was grave. The signs are already beginning. Pay attention to the skies, Marcus. Pay attention to what people are seeing and governments are denying. My blood ran cold. The UAPs, the UFO sightings, the Navy videos. The veil is thinning, he confirmed. We are preparing humanity slowly, showing ourselves more frequently, letting people adjust to the idea. But soon, there will be no more hiding, no more denial. How soon? He was silent for a long moment. Then he said the words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. Before your son is old enough to understand what he's seeing, the world will know we exist. I staggered backward. My son? Sarah and I don't have a son. We don't have any children. Yeshua smiled that sad, knowing smile. You will. My mind went blank. Sarah and I had been trying for 3 years. 3 years amos of negative tests, doctor's appointments, tears, and slowly diminishing hope. We'd finally accepted that maybe children weren't in our future. How do you know that? I whispered. Yeshua's eyes were gentle. Because some things are already written. Not predetermined. You still have free will. But certain paths are more likely than others, certain threads more probable. And I can see them. You can see the future? I can see possibilities, branches, the quantum foam of potential outcomes. Your son exists in the most probable timeline, the one where humanity chooses correctly. I felt tears welling up again. What if we don't? What if humanity fails? Does he still exist? The silence that followed was answer enough. So my son's existence depends on whether the entire human race gets its act together? I asked, my voice cracking. That's not fair. That's not. Nothing about this is fair, Yeshua interrupted, but not unkindly. Nothing about existence is fair, but it is meaningful. Your son will be born into either a world being reborn or a world dying. That choice belongs to humanity, including you. The feminine watcher moved closer, her voice soft in my mind. This is why the personal and the universal are always connected, Marcus. You want your son to live. Billions of parents want their children to live. That collective desire, that love, is the most powerful force in creation. If humanity can remember that connection, that shared stake in the future, you can still turn things around. But how? I demanded. I'm one person. Even if people believe me, even if I tell this story perfectly, what difference can one voice make? More than you know, Yeshua said. He gestured and the space around us filled with images, not of the past now, but of people. Thousands of them, then millions, all doing small things, planting trees, choosing compassion over anger, creating art that inspired hope, teaching children to think critically, standing up to injustice. Millions of individual choices, rippling outward, combining, amplifying. Every avalanche begins with a single snowflake, he said. Every forest grows from a single seed. You're not being asked to save the world alone, Marcus. You're being asked to plant a seed of truth and trust that others will nurture it. The tall watcher spoke again, its voice resonating through my bones. We are activating others like you. All over your world, people are being contacted, shown the truth, given pieces of the larger picture. Some will speak out immediately. Others will wait. Some will be dismissed as crazy, but together, you will create a chorus that cannot be ignored. A chorus of abductees, I said, with a bitter laugh. That's your plan? A chorus of witnesses, Yeshua corrected. People from all walks of life, all faiths, all nations, all telling variations of the same truth. That you're not alone. That love is the answer. That change is possible. That hope is not naive but necessary. I looked at him. at this man who had died for an ideal 2,000 years ago and somehow still carried that burden. Why don't you just tell them yourself? Why wait? Why go through all this? His expression grew sad again. Because if I simply appeared tomorrow, performed miracles on demand, proved beyond doubt that I was who I claimed to be, what would humanity learn? They would follow me out of fear or obligation, not choice. They would surrender their agency, their growth, their potential. I didn't die to create a world of obedient servants. I died to show you that you're capable of being so much more. The third watcher, the one with the deep voice, moved forward. There is something else you must understand, Marcus. When we return your consciousness to your body, you will remember everything we have shown you, but the memory will fade over time, like a dream. This is necessary. If you carried the full weight of this knowledge constantly, it would break you. So I'll forget? Panic rose in my chest. How am I supposed to tell people if I can't remember? Not forget, the feminine voice clarified. The memories will be there, accessible when you need them. But they will be gentler, filtered through your human consciousness in ways you can process and articulate. Otherwise, the experience would drive you mad. Yeshua reached out and touched my forehead. I felt something shift inside my mind, like files being organized, sorted, made manageable. Trust yourself, he said. Trust the process. And Marcus? Yes? When your son is born, tell him I'm waiting to meet him. Before I could respond, the room began to dissolve around me. The watchers, Yeshua, the ship, everything started to fade like mist in sunlight. Wait, I shouted. I have more questions. I need to know. You know enough. The tall watcher's voice echoed in my fading consciousness. Now you must choose what to do with that knowledge, just as humanity must choose. The last thing I saw was Yeshua's face, his sad smile, his ancient eyes full of hope and sorrow. Then everything went black. I woke up screaming. My eyes flew open to darkness. Real darkness, not the luminescent glow of the ship. I was in my bed. Our bed. Sarah was sitting up beside me, her hands on my shoulders, shaking me, her face pale with fear. Marcus! Marcus, wake up! You're having a nightmare! I couldn't speak. My throat was raw, my body drenched in sweat. I looked around wildly, expecting to see the watchers, expecting Yeshua to materialize from the walls. But there was only our bedroom, exactly as I'd left it. The same furniture, the same photos on the dresser, the same crack in the ceiling I'd been meaning to fix. What time is it? I managed to croak. Sarah grabbed her phone from the nightstand. It's 11:52. You've only been asleep for 5 minutes. Marcus, you scared me. You were making these sounds like you were in pain, and then you just went completely still. I couldn't feel your pulse for a minute, and I was about to call 911. 5 minutes, I interrupted. That's impossible. I was there for hours. They showed me everything. Jesus, Sarah. They showed me Jesus. Who showed you Jesus? She touched my forehead, checking for fever. Baby, you're burning up, and you're not making sense. Let me get you some water. She started to get up, but I grabbed her wrist. No, wait. Listen to me. I know how this sounds, but something happened. Something real. I was taken, abducted. Aliens, Sarah. There were 3 of them, and they showed me the truth about Jesus Christ and the second coming, and... Marcus, stop. Her voice was gentle but firm, the way she talked to students having panic attacks. You had a nightmare, a very vivid nightmare. That's all. You've been stressed lately, with your dad's death and the stuff at school, and sometimes stress manifests as, "This wasn't a dream." I pulled away from her, stumbling out of bed. My legs felt weak, like I'd been lying down for days. They told me things I couldn't have known. They said we're going to have a son, that we're going to have a baby. Sarah's expression shifted from concern to something harder. "Marcus, don't. Don't do that. Don't give me hope about something that's probably never going to happen. We've been through this. The doctors said." "I know what the doctors said, but they're wrong. Sarah, I met Jesus. I actually met him. He told me our son exists in the most probable future, the timeline where humanity makes the right choice and—" "Stop." She stood up, wrapping her robe around herself. "Just stop. I know you're hurting. I know losing your dad brought up a lot of stuff about faith and meaning and all that. But you can't cope with grief by having some kind of religious breakdown and dragging me into it." Her words hit me like cold water. I looked at her face. The woman I'd loved for 8 years, the person who knew me better than anyone. And I saw nothing but worry and fear. Not belief, not even the possibility of belief. "You don't believe me," I said flatly. "I believe you had a very powerful dream that felt real," she said carefully. "I believe you're struggling. And I think we should call Dr. Morrison in the morning and—" "A therapist? You think I need a therapist?" "I think you need someone to talk to. Someone professional. Marcus, you're scaring me." I wanted to argue, to insist, to make her understand. But as I stood there in our bedroom, looking at the concern in her eyes, I realized something terrible. This was exactly what Yeshua had warned me about. Very few will believe you. You'll be called a liar, a heretic, possibly insane. Your life will become difficult in ways you can't imagine. And it was starting with my own wife. I sank down on the edge of the bed, my head in my hands. "Okay," I said quietly. "Okay. Maybe you're right. Maybe it was just a dream." But even as I said the words, I knew I was lying. I could still feel Yeshua's hand on my heart, could still see the dead earth, the warning, the choice, could still hear the tall watcher's voice echoing in my mind. "You know enough. Now you must choose what to do with that knowledge." Sarah sat down beside me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. "It's going to be okay," she whispered. "We'll figure this out. Together." I nodded against her shoulder, but my mind was already racing. If I couldn't convince my own wife, how was I supposed to convince the world? More importantly, did I even want to try? Maybe it would be easier to just forget, to dismiss it all as a vivid nightmare and go back to my ordinary life. Teaching history, coaching basketball, grilling burgers on Sunday. But even as I considered it, I felt something shift in my chest, a warmth, a presence, a reminder. Your son exists in the most probable future. And suddenly, I knew I didn't have a choice at all. 3 months later, Sarah took the pregnancy test. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard her gasp from the bathroom. My hands froze on the coffee pot. I knew before she said anything. I'd known since that night, even though I'd barely spoken about it since. Even though I'd gone to Dr. Morrison twice a week and nodded along as he talked about stress-induced hallucinations and the brain's remarkable capacity for creating meaning from chaos. Sarah appeared in the doorway, the test in her trembling hand, tears streaming down her face. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. "Marcus, I'm pregnant." I pulled her into my arms, and as I held her, I felt something break open inside me. Relief, terror, confirmation. The Watchers had been right. Yeshua had been right, which meant everything else they'd shown me was real too. That night, after Sarah fell asleep with her hand on her still flat belly, I went down to my study. I pulled out the notebook I'd been secretly filling for months. Every detail I could remember from that night, every word Yeshua had spoken, every image the Watchers had shown me. I'd told myself I was just processing trauma, working through a vivid dream, but I knew better. I opened my laptop and started typing. "I was abducted by aliens," I wrote. "What they said about Jesus changed everything." The words flowed out of me like water from a broken dam. I wrote about the ship, the Watchers, the truth about Jesus' origins and mission. I wrote about the resurrection, about the 40 days, about the conspiracy of silence that had hidden the full truth for 2,000 years. I wrote about the warning, about humanity's choice, about the dead earth that awaited us if we failed. And I wrote about hope, about the possibility that we could still change course, that love could still win, that even now, even with everything we'd done wrong, we had a chance to become what Jesus had died trying to show us we could be. When I finished, the sun was rising. I had 40 pages. My eyes burned, my back ached. My coffee had gone cold hours ago, but I felt lighter than I had in months. I read through it once, my hands shaking. It sounded insane, completely, utterly insane. I'd be laughed at, dismissed, maybe even institutionalized if the wrong people read it. But I thought about my son, about the future he would inherit, about the choice humanity faced, and I thought about something Yeshua had said, something I'd almost forgotten until this moment. True courage isn't the absence of fear. It's choosing to act despite the fear, choosing what's right over what's safe. I took a deep breath and opened a new browser window. I'd been reading about a video platform where people shared stories, where content could go viral, where truth could spread faster than authorities could suppress it. YouTube. I spent the next week writing a script, refining my story, making it compelling enough to hold attention while keeping every detail the Watchers had shown me. I set up a simple camera in my study, and one night, while Sarah slept upstairs with our son growing inside her, I pressed record. "I died that night," I began, looking directly into the lens. At least that's what the doctors told my wife when they couldn't find my pulse. But I wasn't in a hospital bed. I was somewhere else, somewhere impossible. And the beings that held me there, they knew things about Jesus Christ that the Vatican has never spoken about. I paused, gathering courage. "Before I tell you what they revealed, I need you to understand something. I'm not crazy. I'm not looking for attention. I'm not trying to start a cult or sell you anything. I'm just a history teacher from Ohio who was given a message. And whether you believe me or not, I have to deliver it." I told them everything. When I finished recording 2 hours later, my hands were shaking. I uploaded the video with a title I knew would be controversial. "I was abducted by aliens. What they said about Jesus changed everything." Then I did something that felt insane but also inevitable. I subscribed to my own channel, wrote a simple description, and added tags that would help people find it. My finger hovered over the publish button. This was it. Once I pressed this, there was no going back. My life would change. Sarah would find out eventually. My job might be at risk. People would mock me, attack me, call me a fraud. But somewhere out there in the cosmos, Yeshua was watching. The watchers were observing, and humanity was running out of time. I thought about my son, about the world he deserved to inherit, about all the children being born into a civilization on the brink of collapse. You don't have to be ready. You just have to be willing. I pressed publish. The video went live at 3:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. By morning, it had 12 views. By the end of the week, 1,200. By the end of the month, 12,000. The comments were exactly what I'd expected. Half called me crazy. A quarter mocked me. But the rest said things like, "This resonates with something deep inside me. And I've always felt there was more to the story. And thank you for being brave enough to say this." And slowly, one by one, other people started coming forward. Other contactees. Other witnesses. Other people who'd been shown pieces of the same truth and had been too afraid to speak. The chorus was beginning. I still don't know if it will be enough. I don't know if humanity will make the right choice. I don't know if my son will grow up in a world being reborn or a world dying. But I know I did what I was asked to do. I planted the seed. I told the truth. The rest is up to all of us. 6 months later, Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby boy. We named him Nathan, which means gift from God. The first night I held him, looking down at his tiny, perfect face, I felt that warmth again, that presence. And I heard Yeshua's voice, faint but clear, echoing in my mind one last time. Tell him I'm waiting to meet him, and tell him I'm proud of his father. I looked up at the night sky visible through the hospital window, at the stars that suddenly seemed less distant, less cold. Somewhere out there, the watchers were observing. Somewhere out there, Yeshua was preparing. And down here, in hospitals and homes across the world, children were being born who would either inherit paradise or witness apocalypse. The choice, as it had always been, was ours. I held my son closer and whispered, "The world's going to be complicated when you grow up, buddy. But your dad's trying to make it better. A lot of people are. And maybe, just maybe, that will be enough." Nathan yawned, utterly unconcerned with the fate of civilizations, and fell asleep in my arms. And for the first time since that night 3 months ago, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again. Peace. Not because I knew everything would be okay, but because I knew I'd done everything I could to give him a chance. The rest was in God's hands, or, as I now understood, in ours, which had always been the same thing.